Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I am Councillor Harry Richardson, Deputy Leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council, and I'm chairing this meeting today. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure that mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we will not be using e-voting for this meeting, as there are some problems with the modern.gov app, so we will be voting by simple show of hands. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed, and by entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Susie Morley, Councillor Jessica Fleming and Councillor David Byrne.
Thank you very much. Item number 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary, other registrable or non-registrable interest by members. Are there any to declare? No. Okay, item number 3, paper MCA/22/5, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 6th of June 2022. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No. Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Flatman. And a seconder, please. Councillor Gould. In that case, by way of a simple show of hands, all those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council petition scheme.
None received.
Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There are no matters referred, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. Are there any comments? Nope. In that case, we move on to item number 8, paper MCA/22/6, the General Fund Financial Outturn Report for 2021-22. And I will now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce the report MCA/22/6 on the General Fund Financial Outturn for 21-22. So we're closing out the year with a significant surplus of 1.208 million, which is nearly 20% of our council tax precept for the year. And to my mind, this reinforces our decision to freeze our precept for the current year and potentially beyond, despite the ever-growing inflationary situation in which we find ourselves. But having said that, I feel it is important that we are all aware of the particular narrative that sits behind the surplus in 21-22 and the circumstances that have contributed to it. The main reasons for this in-year surplus are consistent with what we said at the end of quarter 3, the largest constituents being additional planning income and staff underspends. We need to be mindful of the context of the budget setting for 21-22 and where we were when we set the budget in the winter of 2020. We were once again in lockdown and we set our income levels at that time through a somewhat pessimistic lens, as we didn't know how things would recover. We increased our vacancy management factor based on the previous year's activity in relation to recruitment. And the challenge of backfilling vacant posts when someone leaves has already been well rehearsed. Overall, our headcount has increased, but what we are facing in some cases is longer periods whilst posts are unfilled due to the difficulty in attracting suitable candidates. And the result is some teams feeling very stretched and under pressure as they work longer hours to cover the work that's left behind when someone leaves. We know this is something our senior management team are addressing as a matter of urgency. We are proposing to allocate the 1.208 million surplus across 4 reserve headings. To put 500,000 to a new inflationary pressure reserve, 154,000 to the waste reserve, 361,000 to planning legal reserve, and the balance, which is 193,000, to our growth and efficiency reserve. We'll then have over 24 million in general fund earmarked reserves, excluding SIL, as at the end of the year. And that's set out in paragraph 5.8 in the papers. So we're recommending creating this new inflationary pressure reserve, as in setting the 22-23 budget, we do have stretching income targets. We've absorbed inflation, or assumed inflation, in all our departmental budgets. As inflation pressures continue to grow, though, we are likely to see some budgets overspent this year, and that we may need to call on this reserve to manage that scenario. The finance team are working on the impact to the financial position on our budget from pay inflation, from fuel increases, energy costs, and interest rate impacts. All I can say is thank goodness we do have such a healthy and growing level of reserves due to our past prudent financial management and our various established external income streams. Turning now to capital expenditure, we incurred expenditure of 13.309 million in the year. We've got contractual commitments at the year end for a further 377,000, and in addition we're requesting to carry forward 20,156,000 with a breakout of that set out in paragraph 515. Now the biggest component by far is our exciting and ambitious Gateway 14 project at Stowmarket, which is 12.75 million of that capital. It might appear at first sight from the use of the term adverse variance that you'll see in paragraphs 512 and 513 that we've actually overspent on some of our capital projects in the year, but that's an accounting quirk. The additional spend on capital projects comes from external grants and the use of SIL and Section 106 money, and not from our own resources. And to me, that's a positive thing, building valuable infrastructure but using external funding sources. Now, as always, before finishing this brief Outturn introduction, I want to pay tribute to all the hard work undertaken by our finance team in the production of this report and all its underlying numbers and analysis. And in closing, I'd now like to move the 4 recommendations set out in paragraph 3. That includes noting the 1.208 million revenue surplus, noting the various revenue carry-forward requests totaling 399,000 that have been approved by our Section 151 officer, approving the 4 transfers to reserves, as I've already mentioned, and lastly, approving the various capital carry-forward requests. I'll be happy to answer any questions members may have on this very detailed report, but first I'd ask for a seconder for these recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Gould.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Whitehead, for his report, and also, as always, for his very helpful and comprehensive introduction to the report. And to thank John. I know as his Cabinet colleagues are very appreciative of the hard work John does in terms of, in respect of the budget, not least in these difficult times. I'm very pleased to second the report and the recommendations in it. I'd like, as Councillor Whitehead mentioned, I think some of the context or narrative behind this is important, not least the decision we took in terms of the council tax for the current year. I think that was an important decision that we took there, and I know will be appreciated by our residents. I'd also, these are very difficult times. When we set the budget, we had no notion at all about the levels of inflation or the level of unpredictability that is around in managing that budget. And I think the approach that we're taking, not least in relation to inflation, is very sensible. Which we have made a provision, or proposing to make that provision in reserves of £500,000 to deal with those uncertainties. But in the first place, know that we can rely on service managers to do the very best that they can to absorb those pressures within their services. And finally, I'd just like to take the opportunity to congratulate Melissa on her appointment, particularly at a time of virtually unprecedented inflation, and we're in for an exciting ride. But thank you to Melissa and her team for the work that they do. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. And yes, of course, I'd like to echo again the congratulations to Melissa Evans on her appointment as Director of Corporate Resources. I'll now go to questions, but before I do, just a sort of polite reminder to members that as we do have quite an extensive agenda today, if questions could be as succinct as possible, that would be greatly appreciated. So first, are there any questions from Cabinet members? No. Are there any questions from other members present? Councillor Field.
Thank you. I'll try and be succinct. It's always tempting to nitpick the little numbers. I will try and avoid that. Though I have to point out that solar panel income is down 72k on a 141k budget due to light being low in August. It stretches the imagination, but it's hardly the most important thing in the world to discuss. The issue I just wanted to ask Councillor Whitehead really was, I hear all the reasons, excuses, whatever you want to call them, and obviously a number of them are well known and pretty valid. But we always seem to underspend our budget, and that means there's services which we could provide to local people, particularly perhaps those in need, which we're not delivering. We can't save £1 million and deliver what we intended to originally, perhaps. And my perception, to an extent, is amount of that is due to sort of pessimistic forecasting. We forecast more spend and less income than we expect, and we do this repetitively, and we seem to have done the same this year. Is Councillor Whitehead really happy with that position? I say, bearing in mind that we have £1 million, it is great to use, it is sensible to put into an inflation reserve, but it is £1 million we're not delivering to the people of Mid-Suffolk. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Whitehead.
I'll try and be succinct. I'd like to shine a light on the solar panels, but I'll pass on that one. In terms of the underspend and the pessimistic forecast, I mean, I think we can't just necessarily rely on hindsight. Back in the winter of 2020, I think the world did feel very different, and so I think it was correct that we looked through, in terms of forecasting, with I'd say prudent eye rather than a pessimistic eye, but rather than trying to out-promise anything. But as far as I'm aware, I'm not aware, and members can correct me if they like, but in terms of where we haven't delivered, that I think the staff have gone the extra mile where there have been vacancies in covering for absentees, and additional to the basic statutory services and the services that we strategically want to deliver, we've also spent a great deal of time and effort in terms of looking for additional areas that we can spend. And that's the £5 million we put aside, and the amount of work that's gone into that, which I think there's 50 different projects within that. So, I refute the view that we basically haven't delivered. But in terms of how, in terms of service delivery, I'd be happy to see if the Chief Executive wants to put his own point of view in terms of head of pay service on that.
That's very kind of Councillor Whitehead. No, I wasn't particularly going to. I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of we're continuing to deliver services as effectively as we possibly can. We're also continuing to do that in a way that is most efficient as possible, because just because we've got the money doesn't mean we should spend the money, of course, because it's always public funds. But yes, Mid-Suffolk is in the luxury of being in a strong financial position. That's a good thing. I'd also say, whilst it may look overly pessimistic if you look backwards in terms of economic forecasts, I think this year has taught us, if nothing else, that perhaps we haven't been pessimistic enough in terms of the current state of the economy. So all we can do at any given point in time, and particularly when budgets are set in February, is do our best forecasts, same as the Bank of England, same as the government, and then deliver against those. And thank you for Councillor Whitehead's words. I think we are delivering effectively, but we always want to do more.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Mellon.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Councillor Whitehead has just referred to the, I think it was 4 million we initially set aside, which rose to 5.1 million. And I'm sure you remember this time last year, I asked him how much of that had been spent, and it wasn't a great deal. How much of that 5.1 million has now been spent?
Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. So I think your question last time was how much you thought we would be spending by the end of the financial year, which was just 31st of March. So from that point of view, I'd refer you back to that answer, which I think was somewhere in the sort of £250,000 mark, which obviously is a small amount. We're now 3 more months into it, and you know, the finance team and myself have also been concentrating on the outturn for now. We'll be bringing the first quarter projection forward, I think, in August or September, 5th of September, but we'll obviously have an early sight of that. And of course, the first quarter projection will look at the anticipated outturn for next year. So I don't have any figures to hand just now for the spend from April through to June, but as we speak, they're being worked on. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. Are there any other questions? No. In that case, I will open up the item for debate. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to debate this item? No. In that case, I think we'll move straight on to the vote. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Lovely. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 9, paper MCA/22/7, the Housing Revenue Account Draft Financial Outturn 2021-22. I now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'm now pleased to introduce the second outturn report in today's packed agenda, MCA 22/7, which covers the outturn for 21-22 of our ring-fenced housing revenue account, the HRA. I'll try and keep this brief. The HRA covers council housing stock of over 3,300 dwellings, along with associated garages and land holdings. And in the year under review, we had budgeted an in-year surplus of 102,000, and the outturn is in fact a surplus of 113,000. So little difference overall. Our actual total income, unsurprisingly, comes in well within 1% of that budgeted. So I'll concentrate on the expenditure side. The analysis in the table in paragraph 6.5 shows several significant variances within our various expenditure headings, despite the overall net difference being very minor. Building services had a net adverse variance of 407,000, and there's 13 bullet points set out as an explanation for that in paragraph 6.8. So given that details are there, I won't repeat them verbally. But the main issue to note is the use of subcontractors to assist in completing the backlog of void and responsive repairs and maintenance built up during the COVID-19 period. Our depreciation charge was 578,000 above budget as a result of the increase in the valuation of our housing stock. But this is a book entry with no cash flow implications, and as a contra entry, i.e. opposite and equal, as a saving in the revenue and contribution to capital. On the plus side, we have savings of interest payable of 325,000, and a re-evaluation of our bad debt provision has released 68,000. The report also looks at the capital programme, and the details of that are set out in the table within paragraph 616 and in Appendix A. And we're talking pretty substantial numbers here as usual. We spent 13.907 million on this capital programme during the year. We've contracted for a further 1.9099 million, and our ask to Cabinet today is a request to carry forward a further 24,631,000, about 2 years of spending at our current spend rate, as set out in paragraph 619. Now, it is vital that these carry forward requests are approved to enable us to complete the important and ambitious housing schemes in progress. Now, before I propose recommendations, I'd just like to add my own thanks and tributes to our Director for Housing, Gavin Fisk, before he leaves us tomorrow to take up his new role across the road. I thoroughly enjoyed working with Gavin on many HRA matters over the several years. Our HRA has faced many challenges, which he has tackled and addressed with both sincerity and a clear passion, and I feel his dedication and commitment should serve as a role model to us all. And as always, I'd like to thank the finance team for all their hard work in pulling the Outturn numbers in this report together. So, Chairman, without further ado, I'd like to move the 3 recommendations set out in section 3, and we, myself, Lavinia, Gavin and the finance team, are here to answer any questions that members may have. But first, I'll invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to second those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Haddingham.
Thanks. I'm happy to second that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Cabinet members? Are there any questions from other members present? Councillor Field.
Just the issue of the carry forward request, 24 million does sound like a very large number. Is this something always intended, or I have to confess I haven't read every paragraph of this report, so could you enlighten me a little as why is that actually, as you were suggesting, a couple of years of spend? It seems a very large number.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah. I think there are a number of fairly significant schemes in terms of the new build programme. I mean, out of that 24 million, 22.734 is, which is what, 90% I would guess, of that spend is on this new build programme and acquisitions. So and acquisitions come through various things like Section 106, and as planning things go through. So it's not a quick thing at all to sort of deliver those. We see we spent 12 million during the year, so as you say, 24 million is 2 years worth. But I think it just sort of highlights the breadth and scope and ambition of our housing programme. But if Gavin wants to add anything beyond that, I'm happy to take that. Or Emily?
Thank you. So we have around about 350 homes in our new homes in our pipeline over the next 5 years. So that that will deliver those new homes using the 24 million carry forward. We have had some delays in terms of the delivery of some of the schemes over the last couple of years, caused through a number of different issues like COVID, difficulties with supply, labour, etc. So some of our schemes are a little bit delayed, but we do have a considerable number in the pipeline currently, and we've delivered around about 140 homes over the previous sort of 3 or 4 years. So it's quite a significant carry forward, but that does equal the sort of significant acquisition and new build programme that we have in place currently.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Councillor Whitehead or Councillor Haddingham? No. In that case, I'll open this item up for debate. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to debate this item? No. In that case, I suggest we move, as we've got a proposer and a seconder, I suggest we move on to the vote for the 3 recommendations in our report. So can I have a show of hands, all those in favour, please? Lovely. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item 10, paper MCA/22/8, the approval of the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan. And I'd now like to invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I'm pleased to introduce report MC/22/7. Typically, a Housing Revenue Account Business Plan sets out the priorities, plans and actions for council housing over the next 30 years. Our HRA business plan was last revised in May 2017, therefore it is pertinent that after 5 years, a fundamental review of the plan and its priorities took place. The purpose of such plans is to show that we can maintain our existing housing assets and deliver a quality, customer-focused service, as well as improve homes and neighbourhoods, while supporting and endeavouring to achieve the visions of the organisation's key strategies. An effective HRA business plan has become ever more crucial since central government announced the reform of the rules governing local authority housing finance and the introduction of the self-financing system a decade ago. Members may recall that last year they were both invited and consulted on what they saw were the emerging priorities when developing the HRA business plan. This included surveys and a focus group. Whilst in January this year, a paper was presented to the full council on the progress being made to develop the plan and what the guiding principles of the plan would be. Then in May, we held an all-member briefing on the HRA business plan, for which we produced a frequently asked answer sheet in response to members' questions. Today you have the report and final version of the plan in front of you, which provides understanding of the HRA business plan and its aims and objectives ahead of it being approved here today in Cabinet. I'm pleased to promote the key aims of the plan, which include increasing the stock of social housing owned by the HRA through an ambitious development programme, including on average up to 65 new homes each year over the next 6 years. For the next 6 years. Developing new homes that are built to the highest standard, contributing to the Council's effort to ensure carbon neutrality, including an affordable housing strategy, a new build design guide and technical specification. Improve the quality of existing homes and communal areas and reduce the carbon footprint of existing council homes through investment in assets, community-led regeneration, working with communities and individuals, including the investment of more than £14 million to ensure every home meets EPC 3 by 2030. Ensuring that our homes and the management of them maintain and improve well-being outcomes for individuals, families and communities alongside other council services and partners. Making sure that HRA business plans continue to remain financially viable and sustainable. It is vital that the HRA has a balanced financial plan that repays its debt within a reasonable period of time. Therefore, we can currently afford to build 65 new homes for each of the next 6 years. Further itinerations of the HRA business plan and reviews in subsequent years will determine the number that the Council can afford to build in year 7, 8 and onwards. The exact number that we can build in year 7 and onwards will be dependent on continuously reviewing the HRA finances nearer the time on an annual basis and accounting for changes that cannot be predicted today, e.g. further rises and falls in income or expenditure. The plan is focused on 7 main priorities, which are tackling adapting to climate change, developing new council housing, investing in our current homes, involving our tenants in the running of the housing service, improving the service that we provide to our tenants, improving the neighbourhoods that we manage, and implementing the digital transformation. Inevitably, there'll be challenges ahead, including maximising our income, which by 2025-26 will be as much as £20 million per year, as well as being efficient and delivering value for money in our expenditure, which by 2025-26 will have include having invested more than £17 million on repairs to council homes, more than £23 million on capital improvements to existing homes, and more than £62 million on investing in new homes, as well as £33 million of additional borrowing. So I'd like to propose recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 and ask for a seconder. But before that, I'd also like to thank Gavin for his hard work over the last 16 years for Mid Suffolk, and to say that I appreciate all his work and wish him well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Flatman. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Cabinet members on this item? Are there any questions from other members present? Councillor Field.
Thank you. A couple, if I may. One which sort of similar to ones that I've asked before about the rent increase reflects CPI plus 1%. I wondered what the portfolio holder's view is on the impact that will have on residents, bearing in mind that certainly RPI and probably CPI are going to be around 10 or more percent by the end of the year. So a pretty dramatic increase compared with increases in income. The second thing, sort of on a slightly different tack, is I notice we're talking about building new homes and acquiring new homes. I didn't see any estimates of the different costs of those two approaches. I mean, presumably one of them involves paying substantial amounts to developers for conventional sites. The other may involve us building on rural exception sites, for instance. So I wondered if there was any core difference in the costs of those two approaches to expanding our housing stock. And if I may stretch to number 3, 6.3, a series of financial scenarios were also developed which included, and I didn't notice any statement of what the decisions were on those scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. The first question up, we did answer it at full council, as you remember, and I appreciate it's something that we need to keep an eye on. Like you say, CPI, who knows what will happen in the future, and obviously it is something that we're all concerned with. But we did we come to that at full council. The second one, I'm going to ask probably Emily to answer that, if not Gavin or Hazel. And the third one, which page was it? You said that was it 6.2? 6.3. Are you just saying it doesn't make sense, or?
Perhaps, Councillor Field, perhaps I can bring in officers just while Councillor Haddingham is finding the relevant bit. Can I invite the Director of Housing, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll attempt to answer the first and the third question, and then perhaps ask Emily to help with question 2. Just in relation to what may happen with any rent increase next year. Obviously, the government sets out through a rent standard its expectations to protect rents from increasing exponentially. So the CPI plus 1% is actually set out in directions to us and all landlords. We would expect the government that they would need to be making a decision by September if they were to vary those current planned changes from April. There is a lot of talk in the sector as to what may happen with rent increases next year. There's obviously implications, there's advantages and disadvantages of all options, and it could well be that the sector is allowed to make some decisions in terms of just being practical, just being mindful and considerate of the current economic circumstances. So whilst CPI, for example, was 10%, maybe landlords will choose to implement a figure lower than that, and then play catch up over future years if possible. Obviously, there is an impact whilst we want to protect tenants and residents from significant rent increases. It doesn't stop the inflationary pressures that the HRA faces in terms of material costs and the alike. So clearly the service needs to be fit for purpose and affordable, and they will be decisions that will need to be taken over the forthcoming months as part of the budget setting process and as part of any changes that the government implements or chooses to or not. In relation to the last question Councillor Field had, and this was discussed at full council, and I made an apology then and I'll apologise again now. Just to be clear, 6.3, there were initially 7 scenarios scoped and were developed alongside our HRA business plan consultant who offers us advice. And then after we developed those 7 scenarios, we then started to boil those down, distill those to the 2 scenarios that you have in front of you today in the report. Pass over to Emily.
Thank you very much. Yes, if I can invite the Director of Assets and Investments to comment. Thank you.
Thank you. So the value and cost of properties will vary on a scheme-by-scheme basis. So whether that's properties that we're building ourselves directly or whether they're homes that we're acquiring through 106 provisions. And so because of this, we apply a similar approach across all of the schemes so that we can determine whether we're achieving best value effectively for the council. So we use net present value when assessing schemes. So we need a positive net present value in order to proceed with a scheme. So whether that's a new build scheme or whether it's an acquisition, that's the basis we look at. And that's looking at really the value that those new units deliver to the HRA over a longer period of time. So it looks not just at the build costs, but also at the lifetime costs effectively of those units as well. So that's how we assess in terms of both new build and acquisitions. And that's probably a more consistent approach rather than looking at it on a unit by unit, because locationally you'll have different costs, both in terms of the cost of development because of any particular site, but also from a value perspective as well.
Lovely, thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members present? Councillor Mellon.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a question on the design guide, which is part of the report, and it's really a question on what I think is lowered expectations. In the section on resources and lifespan, there are a number of things we say that we will do in terms of new homes that we're building, in particular meeting the Part L 2022 building regulations, which I understand we have to do anyway. And then we have a number of aspirations, such as meeting zero carbon targets in all future homes and reaching the passive house standard or something similar. Can I ask why this is only an aspiration rather than something we will definitely commit to?
Councillor Haddingham.
I think we did also cover this. Your colleague Andrew Stringer answered the same question at full council, and I can ask Emily to repeat her answer if you like.
Yep, the Director for Assets and Investments, please.
Thank you. So within the design guide, we have some commitments that we will make and some aspirational commitments. And it really reflects the fact that the schemes that we're delivering are quite different. So in some circumstances, it will be possible to achieve all of our aspirational criteria, whereas in other circumstances, it won't be possible. So for instance, we're dealing with, in some cases, sites that might be 1 or 2 units, compared to sites of 40 or 50 units. It's very different things that you can provide across those 2 differing opportunities. So it's really to ensure that we've got some flexibility while still aspiring to delivering the most sustainable homes that we can for any of the developments that we deliver, but reflecting the fact that the nature of the schemes could be very different, and so we need that additional flexibility. We'll continue to try and achieve as many of the aspirational criteria as we can for each and every one of our new build developments.
Thank you very much. If there are no further questions, then I suggest we move on to the debate. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to debate this item? Councillor Whitehead.
Maybe not so much debate, but I'd certainly like to say that I really do welcome this report. I mean, something like the HRA, which is standalone, well, ring-fenced and has to stand on its own 2 feet. It's vital that we do have a 30-year business plan. I was a bit frustrated to some extent that this hadn't come, you know, when we did the last budget, we didn't have this to hand, but at the same time, it is important that we can do something quickly or we can do something correctly and properly, and I think the reality is that this needed a lot of hard work. There's a lot of detail in there, but now it's there to be adopted, and it's there for the future. I think we can't underestimate the challenges we face going forward, such things as inflation and the cost of getting to a EPC C level. But at least now we've got the backbone and a plan and guidance to achieve that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. If there are no other members wishing to take part in the debate, then we'll move to the vote, which is on recommendations 3.1 and 3.2 in our report. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Thank you, that is unanimous. Moving on now to item 11, paper MCA/22/9, the Empty Homes Policy 2022. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you very much. Long-term empty homes have caused significant concerns to neighbouring properties, and members have historically asked for more to be done to help resolve the blight they cause. The adoption of this policy will help us to provide more homes supporting our aim and to maximise the use of the private sector to help address the need for local housing. Refurbishing long-term empty homes, particularly those that have been left for long periods of time, is a big financial commitment, and we know that some are struggling to even get started. Residents are encouraged to take advantage of the empty home renovation loan, which I'm sure will make a real difference in helping empty homeowners take the first step in restoring these homes. The policy before you today will support officers in their work to achieve these aims and bring long-term empty properties back into use. With the dedicated resources for both Baber and Mid-Suffolk, it's important that we have approved policy for officers to work to. Substantial work has taken place to draft this policy and was scrutinised for over 2 hours at Overview and Scrutiny, who unanimously approved the policy. Mid-Suffolk members will recall in November last year, Cabinet approved funding for empty homes work as part of the strategic priority reserves. Successful recruitment has taken place and we have a dedicated member of staff for Mid-Suffolk for the next 2 years. Approval of this policy will support the delivery of this strategic priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. Could I ask for a seconder, please? Councillor Brewster. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm very happy to second this. I think it will improve our district with, you know, houses which are falling into disrepair and so on, and we have to stop that in some way. So and this looks to be the very best way of doing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to ask questions? Are there any questions from other members present? In that case, we will open the item up for debate. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to debate this item? No. In that case, I suggest we move to a vote on the recommendations in our report. That's recommendations 3.1 and 3.2. Could I have a vote, show of hands for all those in favour, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. Moving now on to item number 12, paper MCA/22/10, the rent and service charge policy. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. I'm here to present to you the rent and service charge policy. This policy contributes to our housing vision, supporting our strategic aim to be an effective social landlord for delivering quality service. The policy sets out how the council will set rents for council housing in accordance with the legislative, that's it, and regulatory requirements. Aside from consolidating our current working practices in rent setting, this policy proposes to modernise the future application of service charging to tenants. The policy paves the way for the depooling service charges. The depooling service charges, that is, to charge tenants for the services they receive in addition to their rent, rather than the cost of them being subsidised by the general rent pool. This practice is widely adopted in the social housing sector and will enable us to improve service provision and demonstrate to our tenants our commitment to transparency and fairness, which is essential as we rise to meet the changing demands of central government and the regulator for social housing. The government policy of permitting rent increases up to CPI plus 1% is only guaranteed until 2025. The potential for a less favourable deal in the future presents a significant risk to the Council's medium and long-term financial plans. Depooling service charges will mitigate some of the impact a change in government policy might have, enabling the Council to deliver the objectives of the HRA business plans, including improving the energy efficiency of homes and being proactive to meet the needs of tenants in housing management and raising standards. Members will note that we leave the door open to rent flexibility as being an alternative means to generating additional income, which can be a decision made in the future, perhaps at a time when the cost of living crisis has subsided. Both portfolio holders and officers have been working hard to develop this strategy, and the principles were shared more widely last year through our all-member housing briefings. We need to be clear that it's imperative that we have such a policy in place to ensure we are compliant with the regulatory standards for which we know there is greater scrutiny of the management of council housing than ever before. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Flatman. Thank you very much. Do members of the Cabinet wish to ask any questions on this item? Are there any questions from other members present? No. In that case, I'll open the item up to debate. Would any Cabinet member like to debate this item on the agenda? No. In that case, I suggest we move to the vote, which is on recommendation 3.1 in our report. Could I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 14, paper MCA/22/11, Gateway to Homechoice Allocations Policy Review and Amendments. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Housing to introduce the report. Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you. Babel and Mid Suffolk Council are part of a very successful consortium of councils who manage and allocate our affordable housing stock for councils and our housing association partners. The allocations policy ensures a fair and consistent approach across Suffolk and North Essex. It is vital that the policy is kept up to date in response to changing legislation that. I think you all know what I'm saying. The main changes to the policy are in response to the new legislation and guidance for domestic abuse and care leavers. At the same time, we've taken the opportunity to update grammar and other minor word changes. Malden Council and ourselves are the last three councils in the consortium left to approve these changes. The changes are in response to legislation changes and not a whole-scale review of the allocations policy. Members may have views and thoughts on other changes they would like to see in the policy. Such changes need to be fed into me and officers so they can be considered as part of any wider review of the allocations policy, remembering that we are part of a consortium. If the changes are not approved, this would risk legal challenge to the allocations policy and jeopardise other councils in the consortium. Equally, the changes proposed are the benefit to the victims of domestic abuse and care leavers, two vulnerable groups in society. The successful consortium of councils has been in operation since 2009. Working as a consortium, we've substantially reduced our operating costs and benefit from wider knowledge and expertise. It's no mean feat for the consortium of 7 councils to work together successfully. The management of housing applications and the allocation of very scarce but high demand product is a massive challenge. This shared allocation policy means we stay up to date with legislation and reduce the risks of legal challenge that so many other authorities experience. This report has 2 recommendations: approval of the proposed amendments and delegated authority for future minor changes. Other councils in the consortium already have delegations established, and this facilitates quicker, responsive, small changes and does not delay other councils from implementation. The delegation would bring us into line with how other councils operate. I apologise for my terrible speaking.
Thank you very much, Councillor Haddingham. Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Flatman. Thank you very much. Are there any questions from Cabinet members for this item? No. Are there any questions from other members present? Councillor Field.
Yes, difficult one in a way. Certainly, I receive complaints from residents that imply that this process, this policy, adversely impacts young people who are seeking to basically live, I guess, in the villages or at least in the county in which they were born. So it tends to attract people from northern Essex who are basically immigrating out to Suffolk to a nice place to retire, which I did myself, so I perhaps shouldn't complain. But just your view on that, is that a fair assessment, or do young people from Suffolk migrate down and gain council housing in Essex to support jobs in that area? What's the truth?
I don't see it that way, and I wouldn't say that is how it is presented. And unfortunately, Justin isn't here, who wrote this report, but Gavin is, and so I'm sure he can give you his views on the matter.
Thank you. If I could invite the Director of Housing to comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I may start, but I may ask and pass over to Karen Carter, who's sitting to the side of me. Karen works in the Allocations and Assessments team and works as a senior officer within that team. Just in terms of if I start and then Karen can chip in, there is quite a fundamental process and a review that goes on within the CBL sub-region to monitor trends and data, and I think we've recently shared the last year's report. In that regard, if we see significant inward migration, then we can flex and change the policy to support that sort of balancing out or counteracting itself. Invariably, people will move for all sorts of reasons, and I don't think it's just focused on a certain demographic. I think what we've seen through choice-based lettings and the opportunities that the Gateway to Homechoice sub-regional have given us over the last 10 years or more is actually the ability for residents to migrate in and out, subject to lifestyles, economic circumstances, employment, family, the list goes on. And actually what we're seeing overall is a reduction in our overall numbers on waiting lists, which can only be a good thing, and an assumption that actually we're making best use of the stock that we have available. But if I ask Karen to come in and perhaps just comment on the specifics.
Thank you. Yes, we can advertise our properties that are restricted to our own district, so applicants would have to have a connection, so either working or family members in our district, and that depends on the migration of people going in and out of the districts. And this is done on a quarterly basis by the Gateway to Homechoice coordinator, and she runs the statistics to work out how many people we've housed from out of the districts and how many are going in and whether that restriction stays in place. So that's how that works.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from members? No. In that case, I'll open the item for debate. Are there any members of the Cabinet who would like to debate this item? Councillor Whitehead.
Well, just reading in terms of the options, it says that these changes recommended. There are no other options to consider because we need to comply with the statutory framework. I think probably, as Councillor Haddingham would say herself, as a council, we cannot legislate for how the legislation has been brought in by the legislation. Or something very similar to that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Whitehead. Very eloquently put. In that case, can I suggest we move to the vote, which is on recommendations 3.1 and 3.2. So in that case, can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving now on to item number 15, paper MCA/22/12, the Q4 performance report. And in Councillor Morley's absence, I will offer an overview of performance highlights for Q4 of 2021-22 for each of the 6 strategic priorities. These are all examples of how we are enhancing the lives of our residents and our communities across our district. In economy, we completed the master planning work and options appraisal for the Stowmarket Health, Education and Leisure Facility. We published the economic recovery strategy, and we agreed a knowledge transfer partnership with the University of Essex to be jointly funded. In the environment, the main construction work on the solar carports at Mid-Suffolk Leisure Centre in Stowmarket was completed in Q4. The tree canopy report and tree inventory report were finalised, and we agreed the Council's first climate change and biodiversity annual report. For customers, we delivered an automated telephone survey and used the results to plan improvements. We worked with tenants to agree how to improve digital inclusion and identified wards where more support is needed on digital skills. And we are continuing to work with Citizens Advice to explore options to locate digital hubs trials and are linking this with the work around the cost of living crisis. In communities, we surveyed young people in high schools in Mid-Suffolk and Baber, the questions of which focused on health, community safety and local democracy. A domestic abuse champions group has been established to develop an action plan across Mid-Suffolk and its communities, and £500,000 of funding has now been spent to support local community groups and their projects. In wellbeing, we provided a range of activities for children and their families over February half-term. We've worked with everyone active to develop health pathways, offering those referred by GPs and discharged from hospital with long-term conditions a package of rehabilitation at Stowmarket Leisure Centre. And finally, in housing, we granted 46 housing-specific planning applications to deliver 517 homes and started the tenant engagement strategy and improved our choice-based lettings processes to speed up new tenants getting housed. Now, this item is for noting only, so we won't be voting on it, but if there are questions from members of the Cabinet or other members present, then I'm happy to take those now. Are there any questions from members of the Cabinet? No? Are there any questions from members present? Councillor Field.
Yes, just noting the 14% of recycling collected was identified as contaminated or too small to process. That does seem quite a substantial number, and I know, we've had other discussions recently about government-inspired changes that we're going to introduce, which aim at segregating waste to a greater extent. This sort of implies a lack of, well, does this imply a lack of buy-in from certain residents, or is it just confusion in the communication we have with them? And presumably the under 45 millimetres means that just stuff that drops through the bottom of the sorting cylinder, whatever it's called, I've lost the words, and it's discarded but of no particular issue. It doesn't contaminate other waste in any way. So it's really the question is what drives that 14%? Is it lack of buy-in or poor communication with people who would otherwise make a better attempt?
Thank you very much, Councillor Field. I think in Councillor Fleming's absence, I'll invite the Director of Environment and Commercial Partnerships to answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Field. So you're right, 14% is particularly high in terms of contamination. That is a similar percentage across Suffolk, actually. So there is a wider issue across Suffolk, not just for mid-Suffolk for us. It's something that Suffolk Waste Partnership have been working on for some time. Each year we commission some work to have a look at what our contamination rates are so we can keep an eye on them. Predominantly, as it says in there, that people are bagging waste, particularly recycling. You mentioned the mixed recycling facility there. Things can't get sorted if they're bagged in recycling, so that's one issue. So that automatically gets taken out of the process. And then things like dirty items in the recycling all add to it. You're absolutely right, anything under 45 drops through the machine, and therefore it's seen as a contamination as well. I think it's a combination of what you've said. So it is a combination of people misunderstanding, not for any fault of their own, just being confused about the process. And then there is a choice around negligence in terms of recycling as well. It's something that Suffolk Waste Partnership continue to monitor and put out campaigns on. There's more work going on this year in terms of people trying to understand what they should be doing, how they should be dealing with their recycling. In terms of what's going to happen with the resource and waste strategy, that has to have a whole new communication strategy to go with it. So as tough as it is for some people now to understand what they need to do around recycling, it will all change. So yes, lots of work going on in terms of what will need to be done for education for that new service.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field.
Thank you. Very good discretion just to comment on that. I mean, the thing that always concerns me is that you do run into people, for instance, who will say, I'm not putting, let's call it dirty nappies, but smelly stuff in my bin and having it sitting there for 2 weeks. It gets appalling. So what I do is I stick it in the bin that goes every week. So 1 week it goes in the back bin and the next week it goes in the green bin. Which does seem like a major communication problem. And of course, I'm sure as we all have problems with councillors, you never know whether that's one person in 1,000 or one person in 100 or, you know, it's not 1 in 10, but you know, it's difficult to judge the impact of those sort of comments, whether they're real and how many people they affect. But you know, we'll just try and emphasise again, you know, communication does really need to get to the small number of people who don't play the game properly and cause problems. And of course, we all know as well, sometimes it's not exactly easy to understand what you should be doing with certain items, like the 45mm ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Field. If I could invite the Director of Environment to comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't normally like to challenge councillors in the chamber, but I'd say that we don't have weekly collections, so we only have alternate week collections, recycling one week and residual the next. So there isn't either week you would be waiting for the bin to go for another week. So that would be the situation. However, what I would say is anybody that's struggling with their waste, we've got options for people that are bespoke to their household. So if they are struggling with dirty nappies, that kind of thing, they can talk to our team, and there are things we can do around additional collections for them. So whether it's a bin collection or additional bags that we can give them to collect them. So what I'd say is anybody that's having any kind of issues with their waste, just to get in touch with our waste team, and they'll sort out a solution for them.
Councillor Field, if it's a quick follow-up question.
Just a question, it will be good to let people know that that service is available clearly. And what I meant was, if I've got a dirty nappy to dispose of, this week it goes in my black bin, okay, no problem. Next week it goes in the green bin, because that's going to go this week, and that is a problem. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think in Councillor Fleming's absence, I think, am I right in saying this is your last Mid-Suffolk Cabinet meeting? In that case, thank you again for all of your hard work and your time with us, and we wish you all the very best in the future. Thank you. Are there any questions on the rest of this report? No? So this report was for noting only, so we'll now move on to the next agenda item, item 16, paper MCA/22/13, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Communities to introduce the report. Councillor Flatman.
In 2022, the government launched a 2.6 billion UK Shared Prosperity Fund, UKSPF, to support the Levelling Up agenda. The allocation from this national fund for Mid-Suffolk was £1,161,918. The aim and purpose of this funding is to provide a successor to the UE Structural Funds, ESF, and to build pride in place and increase life chances across the UK. Whilst the scheme has been promoted by government as a replacement for EU funds, there are significantly fewer funds available than had been available via EU schemes. So any project allocation will need to be carefully managed. The fund will empower each place to identify and build on their own strengths and needs at a local level, focused on building pride in place. Underneath the overarching aim of the building pride in place and increasing life chances, there are 3 UKSPF investment priorities: communities and place, supporting local business, and people and skills. Authorities are encouraged to identify activities that would support these objectives in their area, including any innovations that are best delivered at a larger scale in collaboration with other authorities or wider partners. This would be informed via engagement with local stakeholders and partners. Council must outline their proposals in an investment plan, which must be submitted to government by the 1st of August. Investment plan development. In order to facilitate the development of the plans, we have formed internal officer groups and worked across Suffolk authorities to discuss key priorities and funding. Potential projects have been identified from a range of adopted council strategies, including the communities and wellbeing strategies and the economic recovery plan, to ensure that the funding helps to deliver against recognised need within the district and meet agreed outcomes. These projects have been grouped into wider thematic areas to provide for future flexibility and are ongoing a wide stakeholder engagement process to make sure they are supported locally. They include schemes to support youth social prescribing, social enterprise, small businesses and community supermarkets, to name just a few. Finally, as part of the wider Suffolk discussions, SPSL has agreed to top slice funds from each authority to provide Suffolk-wide schemes around business support and growth and skills, as these areas are impacted by a loss of EU funding. We are consulting on the proposals at a local and Suffolk-wide level and will ensure feedback from the engagement is fed into the final plans. I am therefore asking Cabinet to approve the recommendation presented today. To note progress on the development of the draft investment plan, which is attached at Appendix A. To note the consultation process underway excuse me, that will inform the final investment plan, which is attached at Appendix B. To agree delegation to the Assistant Director for Economy and Regeneration in consultation with the portfolio holders for economic development and communities to finalise the investment plan prior to the submission to the Government. And I beg your pardon, but I have lost the number. Just bear with. Here we go. So I ask the Cabinet to endorse MCA 2213 on this agenda item 16, and I would ask for a seconder, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Flatman. Councillor Brewster. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm very happy to second this one, but I also note that we haven't got the director or the corporate manager in the room, and I think they probably are instrumental in in being there.
I think it probably is because we're a little bit earlier than anticipated.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster. What I suggest we do in that case, if members feel that it's necessary to have officers present for this item, is I suggest we adjourn for 15 minutes and see if we can get the officers present for this agenda item. So we'll pause the meeting here, and if I could ask for members and officers to be back here at 11:55, please. Thank you very much. Good morning everyone and welcome back to this meeting of Mid-Suffolk District Council Cabinet. We are resuming item 16, paper MCA 20/22/13, the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We have Councillor Flatman proposing the recommendations in the report and Councillor Brewster seconding. I'll now move on to questions from Cabinet members. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, outside of any briefing, I spoke to the relevant director about the fact that my question was, does this investment plan that's submitted cover all 3 years, or do we submit 3 plans over the 3 years? And I was surprised that the government require us to put our full 3-year programme in by the 1st of August, because the 64% of the spend is in year 3, 24% is in year 2, and only 12% in year 1, and yet we're supposed to do a finalised plan by the 1st of August. And it seems to me that if we come up with ideas for levelling up for year 3, which are really valid ones, it's frustrating we'd have to wait for year 3 to implement them. I suspect we'd probably want to go to our Growth and Efficiency Fund. So I'm quite frustrated with the government in terms of how they've done this process and required us to finalise our plans from the 1st of August.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Councillor Flatman?
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Yes, when we had our meeting with Fiona on this, it was lastminute.com, if you like. We've been thrown into looking for, projects that are going to be very valuable in very short time to get all this work together. And I'm hoping she's going to walk through the door any minute now. Oh, lovely. Can I pass that over to you? Lovely, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. If I could invite the Corporate Manager for Economy and Business to comment, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and apologies from Fiona because of the timetable for Cabinet. She was hoping to be here as well. In terms of the timetable that Government has given us, we are looking at a 1st of August deadline for submission of a 3-year investment plan. However, what Government has suggested is that the year 1 needs to be detailed plans. Year 2 and 3 can be indicative. So what we are expected to provide are broad outlines of the types of projects that we think that we will deliver across years 2 and 3. But because we're already actually within year 1, we're expected to provide much more detail about the delivery of the projects within this current year, and then more broad information about the thematic programmes that we will deliver against in years 2 and 3, with an expectation that we will work alongside other Suffolk authorities for primarily the education and skills programmes in year 3, but also looking at some of the business support programmes in year 2 and year 3. So what Government are expecting is not a full programme plan for every project, for every penny of the 3-year investment plan. What they want is indicative outcomes and outputs for the types of jobs that we'll create, the number of programmes we'll run, the number of people put through specific investment or training programmes, the number of businesses supported by schemes, the number of young people that we will help through training programmes, for example, rather than saying we will spend £200,000 on this project in year 3.
Thank you very much. Councillor Whitehead.
Very sure to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from Cabinet? No. Are there any questions from other members present? In that case, I will open the item up for debate. Does any Cabinet member wish to debate this item? Yes, Councillor Flatman.
Yeah, well, I'd just like to say that, I'd like to thank the officers for rallying around this, because, it's very last minute. We already have our 5 million spend that we're looking at and working on, and then to have this if you like, thrown in at the last minute. You know, no one wants to turn money down, so obviously we're going to do our absolute best to make sure we are in line to get this this extra money, which we can use to definitely to expand on other projects that and some of these things we already had in the pipeline anyway. So in a way, that's come. We can't look a gift horse in the mouth. We're going to have to utilise it as to the very best of our abilities. And yes, thank you to Fiona's team for all the work they've been doing around this. And it is what it is, and we must use it to our very best advantage. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Flatman. If no other member of Cabinet wishes to debate this item, then I suggest we move on to the vote, which is on the 3 recommendations in our paper. Can I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Yeah, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Moving then finally on to item 18, paper MCA/22/5, the confidential minute of the Mid-Suffolk Cabinet meeting held on Monday the 6th of June 2022. This minute is confidential, so if members wish to discuss the minute, the meeting will need to go into a closed session. The vote will be taken on in an open session, however. Does any member wish to discuss the details of the minute? No. In that case, I propose in first instance, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Gould, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Whitehead, thank you very much. In that case, we will now go to the vote, in which case could I have a show of hands for all those in favour, please? Thank you very much. That is, again, unanimous. Lovely. That brings us to the end of our agenda today. The date and time of the next meeting is scheduled for Monday the 5th of September at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much for attending, and I will now close this meeting. Good afternoon.